GitHub interview questions. Here are one-liner answers to the 30 GitHub interview questions. Okay. What is the GitHub? How does it differ from Git? GitHub is a web-based platform for hosting and collaborating on Git repositories, while Git is a distributed version control system. Explain the concept of repositories in GitHub. Repositories in GitHub are storage spaces where project files and revision history are kept. What are the benefits of using GitHub for version control? Benefits include collaborative development, version history, branching and merging, code review, and community contributions. Describe the difference between git pull and git fetch. Git pull fetches changes and merges them in the current branch, while git fetch only fetches changes. What is a git branch? How do you create and merge branches in GitHub? Git branch is a pointer to a specific commit, and you create and merge branches using git branch and git merge commands. What is a pull request? How do you create and review pull requests in GitHub? A pull request is a request merge changes created on GitHub by selecting a branch and clicking new pull request. How does forking work in GitHub? Forking creates a copy of the repository under your GitHub account, allowing you to make changes without affecting the original repository. Explain the difference between Git clone and Git fork. Git clone creates a local copy of a repository, while forking creates a copy on GitHub. What is Git branching strategy and what are some common branching models used in GitHub? Git branching strategies define how branches are organized with common models including Git flow and GitHub flow. How do you handle merge conflicts in GitHub? Merge conflicts are resolved by editing conflicting files, marking them as resolved, and committing changes. What are GitHub actions and how can they be used for CI/CD workflows? GitHub actions are automated workflows for building, testing, and deploying code directly on GitHub. What is the purpose of a README file in a GitHub repository? The README file provides project information and documentation, helping other users understand and contribute to the project. How do you revert a commit in GitHub? Commits are reverted using git revert followed by the commit hash. Explain the difference between git rebase and git merge. Git rebase reapplies commits onto another branch, while git merge combines changes from different branches. How do you tag releases in GitHub? Releases are tagged by creating a new release in the repository settings and specifying the tag, version, title, and description. What is Git submodules and how do you use them in GitHub? Git submodules are repositories embedded within another repository added using Git submodule add. How do you manage project documentation wikis in GitHub? Provides wikis and README files for project documentation edited using Markdown syntax. Explain the concept of GitHub pages. How can you use it to host a website? GitHub pages host static websites from GitHub repositories by publishing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files to a special branch or folder. What are the GitHub GIFs and how can they be used? GitHub GIFs are used to share snippets of code or text supporting syntax highlighting and version history. Describe some best practices for collaborating on GitHub projects. Best practices include descriptive commits, feature branches, code review, communication, and adherence to standards. Explain the concept of Git hooks. How can you use them in GitHub? Git hooks are scripts executed before or after Git events used for automation and enforcing rules in workflows. What is a Git blame and how can you use it to trace changes in a file? Git blame shows the commit history of a file indicating which commit and author last modified each line. Describe the process of rebasing in Git. When would you use it? Rebasing applies commits from one branch onto another, useful for maintaining a clean history or integrating changes. What is a git ignore file? How do you create and manage it in GitHub? Git ignore files specify untracked files to ignore, created as .gitignore in the repository root. How do you squash commits in GitHub? Commits are squashed using git rebase-i to combine commits interactively. Explain the difference between git amend and git rebase interactive. Git commit dash amend modifies the last commit, while git rebase-i performs an interactive rebase. How can you contribute to open source projects on GitHub? Contribute by forking the repository, making changes, and creating pull requests to propose changes. What are GitHub code spaces and how do they enhance the development experience? GitHub code spaces are cloud hosted development environments accessible from the browser or IDE, enhancing development by providing pre configured environments. How do you secure your GitHub repository? What are some best practices for repository security? Security repository enabling two-factor authentication, managing permissions, monitoring activity, and avoiding storing sensitive information. Describe a situation where you had to resolve a challenging issue while using GitHub. How did you handle it? Provide an example of a challenging situation, such as resolving merge conflict or debugging a CI/CD pipeline failure, and explain the steps taken to address it.